So Max asks, does Greg know about, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, the Georgescu, Rogan, and Herman Daly? They're insane. I don't know what this is.
Okay, I've never heard of this. The pioneering economist says our obsession with growth must end. Okay. So it's like a degrowth thing. I haven't read his work, so I don't know about, I can't answer it entirely. But it looks like he's talking about a steady state economy instead of just kind of like this hyper expansive kind of like,
Yeah.
so like growth economy. I mean, I think that has its benefits for the environment and for us just in general. I I'm skeptical about solutions for climate change. That's just like buy more things. I'm like that just doesn't make any sense because of my analysis on where the problem is, where it's a lot of taking the minerals from the earth and then repurposing them and then using them. It's reduce, reuse, then recycle. So a lot of people just go right to recycle, and that's not really the way. People think that like, oh, I'm going to recycle things, so then it's 100% reuse, and it's like that's not true. Like there's a lot of energy that's required in order to repurpose those minerals and those materials. So that's why, like for example, like if you're recycling your water bottles, it's not an efficient strategy versus just having a water bottle that you use and you reuse. So, but first, you reduce your amount of your stuff. I mean, these are good like personal things that you could do. Changing our entire economy towards like a steady state growth economy. I mean, consumer capitalism, I'm very skeptical that there's going to be, that's going to be the mindset that this comes from. Like, for example, like this whole, like, I'm actually kind of skeptical about electric vehicles. This whole idea of like, now everyone just needs to buy a new car and then that's going to be able to change everything. Like, it's changing our, like, every single, gas station needs to be basically taken out, and we need to put a brand new station in that's a charging station that needs to have battery hot swaps and all that kind of stuff. And you're like, dang, dude, like that is so, that's
Well, it's like the thing with the sea otters. Like these things emerged to fit an environment that presumed the existence of certain kinds of fuel sources and certain kinds of attitudes towards, travel and spacing things out and how to like arrange human dwelling spaces and things like that. It seems like probably the most expensive and damaging kind of solution you could have is one that tries to maintain those things completely and just replace them with a more benign alternative at every single level, because all those other things are still maintained in the process. It's literally just an inconvenience because you didn't happen upon those by itself for a reason. You had to sell it as like being part of a project. Now you're opening up to all this other stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically electric vehicles have the same problems as our gas vehicles. Is that when we mine, like for example, when we mine gas, we don't live in the tar sands, so it's like kind of like an out of the way area. For example, when you have like rare earth minerals being mined, that's kind of like another place, right? Again, when you're using your combustible engine, CO2 is invisible and it goes out your tailpipe and you don't even think about it. When you're using electric vehicles, where is your electricity coming from? Is it coming from a renewable source? Is it coming from compressed natural gas, or is it coming from coal? A lot of the United States is still on coal, and then at the end,
it's magical clean energy. It comes from the sky.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the very end, the waste products. So the waste products of CO2 is in the atmosphere, and we don't have to think about it. The waste product from batteries is going to be in landfills, and we don't have to think about it then. So we've kind of like not changed anything about the entire experience, but everything is like you just have to buy it. And so, like for example, I mean, I'm biased again. I'm very biased on this one, but Algae Biofuels can make any car that's a combustion engine with basically a biodiesel change It's very easy to do on a car, an add-on, and you can make any combustible car a renewable fuel car. So, I can take my '92 Ford Ranger and change it into a renewable fuel car. Can I do that with a Tesla in Missouri or Kansas? Like, I mean, if I had solar panels, maybe. I mean, but if an algae basically would be able to use all of those gas stations, all that infrastructure, all those pipes, everything, we would be able to reuse that because it would be the same fuel. Basically, the fuel that we're using right now from in our gas, it's just carbon lipids that have been linked together, and that's just hundreds of millions of year old algae and plants. And now we pull it out from the gas companies, pull that carbon out from the earth, and then they refine it. So they don't actually make the product, by the way. Oil companies don't actually make the oil; they just refine the oil, and then they sell it to you, and then we combust it. So we could actually have that carbon, instead of pulling it from those carbon sinks like we were talking about before, we can actually just grow algae that's based off of carbon from the air. So the big difference is that algae biofuels would still combust. It's the exact same amount of emissions, but it's where is the carbon coming from? Is the carbon coming from the atmosphere, or is it coming from sinks that are in the ground that should not be pulled up? So it's a huge advantage. It's a huge advantage. The big problem with carbon, with algae biofuels, is basically the amount of energy that was used in order to make the biofuel. So going from an algae solution to the oil itself. And that's going to be present with other oils, by the way, with other lysates that you have with crude oil. But right now, it's actually the biggest problem is how do you remove the water from the reaction so that you can take out the oils, because water and oils don't mix, so they don't do well together in a chemical reaction. So it's basically how do you don't want to boil the algae because that's a lot of energy, but we want to try to separate them. So that's kind of like where the new technologies are going.
Okay, interesting. So I suppose, just to jump right to it, as like a general program for addressing this, like assuming you had some summit and every single world leader was they had a stable enough handle on their economies and their governments in order to do this. Every single world leader agreed, okay, we are taking we are going to communally address this. What would they do if they were taking your advice?
Basically right now, so 10 years ago, 2010, the figure was about you need an algae pond the size of Texas in order to make the amount of oil that the United States uses constantly. The United States is the highest user of oil, so it's a good thing to think about. Now, I mean, algae biofuels and biotechnology has increased dramatically. It's actually one of the things that we're making huge progress on. And we have new molecular biology tools like CRISPR. We have incredible new next generation sequencing technologies that allow us to do a lot more mutants, a lot more things called directed evolution, where we're trying to make better photosynthetic algae. And we're hitting all of our marks, by the way. We have the Department of Energy. Sorry, this is all going to be United States focused because that's where my knowledge of this
that's okay. And by the way, for the chat, this is the prologue to a zombie film. You were correct. Sorry.
So the Department of Energy has the BETO office, which is the biotechnology. Oh, shoot. I forgot what it is. DOE. But it's an algae program. The Bioenergy Technologies Office. They have a national laboratory in the United States that's dedicated to biofuels, and the Department of Defense in the United States has their number one national defense problem is climate change. So they're actually putting a ton of money into biofuels. Full disclosure, I have a Department of Defense fellowship, and partly because of algae biofuels and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of money going into it for national defense purposes and to just make this stuff happen. But my point is 2010, it's the size of Texas. Now with the lipid productivity levels and stuff like that, we're at like the size of Montana. So it's dramatically less. I think it's like 30% less space required. So I mean, we're making a lot of progress. There are really cool things that are happening, and there's never going to be an all electric motor, like all electric movement. It's just impossible to do airplanes electric. If you do the physics on it, it's just you get into weird problems where it's like you need more thrust. Okay, so we need more thrust, so we need more batteries. Okay, we need more batteries. Now we have more weight from the batteries. Okay, we need more thrust. And you're like, okay, we're in a circle right now, and that's kind of what happens. So there's just never going to be electric 747s in the planes. It's just never going to happen. So you have all of the DoD, the Air Force, the Navy. The Navy is really interested in algae biofuels. There's actually 747s that have run on algae biofuel mixes. So it's full steam ahead, and there's a lot of awesome developments that are happening in it. So, there's a good chance that the combustion engines of the future are going to be algae based, and you wouldn't even know about it. You're not even going to have a change in your everyday life if you're going to be going on a plane.
So it's roughly 30% down now in terms of the space commitment in order to make that viable.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate that continuing to shrink, or?
Oh, it's going to shrink for sure over time. I don't know if that's like the low hanging fruit that we got. I don't know if it's going to be another 30% in 10 years, but I mean, algae are so much more productive than plants because plants have these skeletons kind of thing. They have branches, they have a lot of space that's kind of just not useful. But an algae is just a Chlamydomonas brownhardi, which is kind of like the model organisms for eukaryotes and green plants and green algae. It is a plant, so every single algae cell is its own plant, and we're talking about millions and millions of different of algae in 1 milliliter. So, and we're talking about huge algae ponds here, and they're very productive. So it's just so much more productive. I mean, I think it's so much higher that I don't even want to say the number because I might get it wrong. But I thought it's hundreds and hundreds of times more efficient for the making of fuels. There is right now a lot of our maize, but corn in the United States is used for basically fermented. The glucose and the sugars is used and to create ethanol, and then that ethanol is actually put into our gas. So that's 10% of our by volume. It actually says in the United States like 10% of this is bioethanol. So it's a weird kind of like thing that's from the 90s that Bill Clinton passed. That's like, it's not that efficient, actually. We could actually use that money probably for biofuels in other ways that would be a lot more efficient, like algae. But it's just kind of like a vestige of, and the corn lobby is just insanely strong in the United States.
Use all of those resources for something other than corn.
Yeah, exactly.